For 80 million years, New Zealand has been separated from the rest of the world. This geographic isolation led to an isolated evolutionary history which is different from any other place in the entire world. While mammals ruled the roost across the globe, New Zealand had a distinct lack of land mammals. The only native land mammals known to have lived in New Zealand historically are three types of bats, one of which is now extinct, and an extinct mouse-sized archaic mammal from the Miocene, which is only known by two 19-million-year-old fossils, one of a jaw fragment and one of a femur. In all the other continents across the world, mammals fill, and have filled for a long time, a vast array of niches in their respective ecosystems. However, because of the lack of class Mammalia, class Aves stepped in to fill the roles that many mammals normally would have in New Zealand. New Zealand was truly a kingdom of the birds. While the islands of New Zealand today sport some spectacular indigenous birds, such as the kakapo and the various kiwis, there once walked a group of birds on those two islands that was utterly mind-blowing: the moa. They consisted of 6 genera and 9 species. The most famous of the moa belonged to the genus Dinornis, which contains 2 species: Dinornis novazelandiae, the North Island giant moa, and Dinornis robustus, the South Island giant moa. The giant moa were huge. With their neck outstretched, they reached a height of 3.6 meters, and they could weigh as much as 230 kilograms. Another moa species was Anomalopteryx didiformis, also known as the bush moa. Like all moa, it was an impressively sized bird, standing at 1.3 meters in height. It inhabited much of the North Island and some parts of the South Island of New Zealand. It is the only species of its genus. Anomalopteryx is not the only monotypic genus of moa. The other monotypic genera of moa are Emmaus, Eropteryx, and Megalopteryx. Emmaus crassus, the eastern moa, could grow up to 1.5 or 1.8 meters in height depending on the sex of the bird. This was cause for some confusion among the scientific community, as skeletal remains of the two genders were classified as different species before it was realized that they were part of a single species, which demonstrated sexual dimorphism. The eastern moa lived only in the South Island, inhabiting the lowland forests, grasslands, dunelands, and shrublands. Its feet were remarkably wide. Because of this, it is hypothesized that Emmaus crassus was slower than other moa species. Europteryx curtis, known colloquially as the broad-billed moa, stout-legged moa, or coastal moa, was a widespread moa that inhabited not only the North and South Islands, but Stewart Island as well. Like many moa species, it lived in lowland habitats. Megalopteryx didinus, the upland moa, was a species of moa that adapted to enduring the hardships of the South Island mountainous alpine regions. They would travel up to heights of as far as 2,000 meters. It stood around a meter tall and is estimated to weigh about 17 to 34 kilograms, which is much smaller in comparison to other moa species. Feathers covered the entirety of the species' body, except for its beak and the soles of its feet. This was most likely an adaptation to its cold environment. The genus Pachyornis contains 3 species: Pachyornis elephantopus, the heavy-footed moa, Pachyornis geranoides, Mantell's moa, and Pachynoides australis, the crested moa. Both the heavy-footed and Mantell's moa were lowland inhabitants, the former inhabiting the South and the latter inhabiting the North Islands. On the other hand, Pachyornis australis, the crested moa, inhabited high-altitude, subalpine forests of the South Island. It got its name from pits in its skull that indicate it most likely contained crested feathers on its head. It was the ecological equivalent of the heavy-footed moa in the subalpine zone. While the heavy-footed moa and crested moa remains were on occasion found together, it is commonly thought that the heavy-footed moa preferred warmer lowlands and stayed there most of the time, whereas the crested moa would only migrate to the lowlands during winter time. Moa belong to the ratite family, the same family that cassowaries, rheas, and ostriches belong to. Ratites are flightless birds. They are classified based on their sternums lacking a keel, which flight muscles could be anchored to. We know about moas from the remains they left behind. The 3 most common types of sites for finding moa bones are caves, sand dunes, and swamps. It is theorized that bones found in caves were deposited because of the birds entering the cave for shelter and then subsequently dying, or birds that were caught in a fissure but were unable to escape. Sometimes moa bones and eggshell fragments are found in sand dunes, where they were covered in sand after they were deposited. The paleosols, which they were entombed in, were later eroded by wind action causing the preserved remains to be exposed and subsequently discovered. Moa bones are often discovered in great numbers in the swamps of New Zealand. For example, at the swamp of the foot of Pyramid Valley in 1939, bones from an estimated 183 individual moas were excavated. The most widely accepted explanation for this massive set of remains is that they accumulated over thousands of years from birds that entered the swamps to feed or drink but then became trapped and buried. Remarkably, some specimens of soft tissue moa remains have been found. These were preserved by desiccation, as a result of the moa dying in a very dry place, often a cave with dry wind blowing through it. There have been a number of moa trackways discovered on the North Island preserved in fluvial silts. From these footprints we can determine that moa walked at a speed of about 3 to 5 kilometers per hour. Other aspects of moa behavior can be determined despite none being alive today. The diet of moas is known, for example, from coprolites and fossilized remains found in gizzards. Their diet can also be deduced by isotope analysis of their bones and study of the morphological traits of their beaks. Moa were browsing herbivores that filled the niche in their habitat that is usually occupied by large mammalian herbivores such as llamas, ibex, or goats. Sadly, the arrival of New Zealand's first humans spelled the destruction of the moa. Sometime around 1300, the Polynesian ancestors of the modern-day Maori settled on New Zealand. Carbon analysis of middens suggested that the decline of moa species was incredibly rapid, less than 100 years. It is likely that moa fell victim to habitat destruction and hunting. Moa weren't used to predation from land. Their only natural predator was the Haste's eagle. When human settlers attacked moa, it is likely that the birds did not even perceive the threat. By the 1400s, all moa genera and their predator, the Haste's eagle, are thought to have become extinct. There are some controversial claims that Megalopteryx didinus may have persisted in the remote areas of New Zealand for many more centuries, though no direct evidence supports this. These claims are based on the fact that Megalopteryx didinus was much smaller and lived in far more remote areas of New Zealand, and therefore managed to evade predation from humans for longer. Although us humans have been the death of moa, perhaps we may revive them. Moas have been mentioned as a potential candidate for revival by cloning. They have a very iconic status among both New Zealanders and people across the world alike. Already, geneticist Anko Yasuyuki Shirota has been extracting DNA for the purposes of cloning from some of the vast quantity of moa specimens that exist. Cloning moas and breeding them into viable population would be a tough task, but in my opinion, a worthwhile one. Maybe these magnificent creatures will one day walk the forests, plains, dunes, and scrublands of New Zealand once again. We can only hope. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, be sure to leave a like, and also subscribe to my channel for more content of this type. Also, if you know anyone who you think might like this video, be sure to share it with them. Thanks a million, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.